Good day. What a joy to see everyone, at least all of us who have managed to get our time right. There might be some people uh, coming on right at the end going, uh-oh, hard to sort it out. And out here, for Ed and I, it's 7:30 in the morning, a little bit of a shift. I'm sure other people will be arriving, so let's enjoy our sitting together for a few minutes. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. It's so beautiful to see everyone during Zazen sitting with their best intention. I see you shift, like, okay, the bell rings and you sit up, and appropriately so, you're offering yourself in a way to express your Buddha nature rather than just kind of hanging out or waiting. Or it's as if there's our karmic body, like the habit body, the way we would kind of sit naturally and joyfully. It's great. But then you say, okay, for a moment, I'm going to sit as Buddha's body and express my true nature in that way. And sometimes it's a bit uncomfortable. And I think that discomfort sometimes is that feeling of a gap between our karmic body and Buddha's body. It's like we can feel it. It's kind of an unusual thing. So I'm quite joyful seeing you today. There's something that I mentioned apparently, because I've gotten feedback about it last time, where I mentioned almost to the side that when those of us who are sitting in the teacher seat are inviting us into inquiry, this time when we give express ourselves in this way, I said it's not a Dharma talk. Do you remember me saying that? Some of you said this isn't exactly a Dharma talk. And last week, several people commented to me personally. And so I thought I would say a little more about it, because it's important and interesting to me anyway. Maybe it is to you. And this shared inquiry, remember the name, and we're inquiring. It's like a curiosity. And I have said, and actually, I think it was Josh that echoed a few weeks ago this thing about taking one's mind for a walk. And I've said in the past, it's like, just go on a walk with me. We're going to take our hearts and minds on a walk. And it can be very encouraging, or it can be kind of solemn and somber. It can be joyful. It's also, the way I think about it when I begin thinking about what to say, it's like a drop in a puddle that's very quiet, and reflective, and then a little stone gets tossed into it, or one drop of rain falls in it, and then these ripples start to go out, and I get fascinated by the ripples. Like, what is this? And then I follow where the wonder takes me, hoping you might come along with me, that it might be useful for you or curious. And then what comes to mind is a phrase that Hongzhi used in his writings many centuries ago. We said, wander into the center of the circle and wonder. Wander into the center of the circle and wonder. And it's kind of what we're doing. But as soon as I say that, I've just given you an example of what happens in my mind. That's what happens. One thing leads to another. So just saying that, I'm suddenly led to something else. And the world begins to open up. And we follow the trail together with curiosity. And we discover dead ends. Trail kind of peters out, or unexpected side trails that we didn't imagine would happen. There are gifts that we discover along the way that someone's left for us. We together experience sorrows, terrors, joys, and deep questions that we can't really answer, but that we want to meet and walk with. Lots of questions, but not formal questions, not like kind of the questions we usually think of. I don't know, the ones we kind of live with in a way. So I do this, and I do it out loud and show you so you'll do it. I think that's the best a teacher can do. I'm not trying to give you information, although I offer you information, certainly. I'm not trying to teach something. That's a Dharma talk or a lecture would be, I want to impart some information in a way that's really understandable. And that comes into it. But that's not what's really happening in inquiry. I want you to wander with me and wonder with me and be curious as we sit and appreciate our lives together. This amazing existence of our shared lives. And we're here for such a short time. I don't mean just online. I mean here for such a short time. And we require each other if we don't want to get stuck in our habit patterns and the inevitable suffering that we're going to experience in the delusions which sometimes encourage and sustain unnecessary suffering in this beautiful, painful, perfect, messed up world. So anytime, not just here, anytime when you notice a little drop or a little pebble that lands in the puddle of your awareness, follow it. When you notice a thread that's just sticking out, tug on it a little bit. See what unravels. It's sitting with just the most ordinary, interesting, curious thing is like a koan. Just make friends with it and see if it will converse with you. And you can also, if you'd like to write, you can write your way to the end of what you know. See where it takes you. Just follow it. And then sometimes we share our investigations like this, where you come forward and share yours, and then I respond. Or we write something as an email to each other, or somebody writes a poem, or makes some music, or creates a painting, or whatever it is. And that's the way we share our investigations, our playfulness with life, our terrified explorations to the edge. And sometimes our curiosity takes us down unexpected rabbit holes or into these wondrous lands we can only barely imagine. But I just wanted to reflect a little bit on what I think this is, which is different than a classroom, different than a seminar, different than even a Dharma talk, and which information is being imparted. So here's a pebble. Here's a raindrop that landed in my consciousness this past weekend and has stayed with me. So the ripples continue to come. And this was something that came out of the one-day retreat with the Awakening Together Sangha in the Twin Cities here in the United States. And I'm not going to go into all the teachings of that retreat, which had to do with taking refuge in Buddha. But there was a quotation that the leaders who wrote up the description used. It was a quotation from Kobuchino Roshi, a teacher, a deceased teacher in our lineage. And here's a quote. It's very short. I'd not heard it before. And so it was new to me, and also it really touched me, so it stayed with me. The quote is, returning to the self, the true self that is nobody, is nothing but the complete awakening. We call this Buddha. Returning to the self, the true self, which is nobody, is nothing but the complete awakening. We call this Buddha. I just really was taken by it. And so those were the first ripples. It's like now it stayed with me. Like it's walking with me all the time as a koan. I began to, one of the ways that I play with it, which you know, because you've heard me do it before, sometimes I see what it's like to move the words around a little bit and see what it's saying, especially reading things backwards in a certain way. So if you take just these few lines and say, remember, returning to the self, the true self which is nobody, is nothing but the complete awakening. We call this Buddha. What do we call Buddha, which is the complete awakening? It's nothing and nobody, which is the true self, to which I can return. It's like, oh, it becomes a little bit alive. I remember, and once again, see, now I'm following the little trail, the crumbs. I remember Blanche would use a quotation from Katagiri Roshi quite a lot. She loved it. And I'm going to make a little signal with my hand to express something here. She'd say, let the self rest on the self and allow the flower of your life force to bloom. Let the self rest on the self and allow the flower of your life force to bloom. It's a good one as we start moving towards spring. Are you having any flowers pop up in the UK already or no? Yeah. Oh, good. Daffodils? Oh, good. Someone, Efrat sent me a beautiful picture of crocuses exploding in Madison, and so things are happening. Let the self, let all of these little parts of ourselves rest on this larger self, which is nobody and nothing, and let the flower of your life force bloom, which is Buddha's life. And then one more little crumb on the trail, which I discovered, which I also did not know. See, this is my mind working. I'm following. And this is from another Zen master, Emily Dickinson, number 1563. So the words are a little unusual, of course, and penetrating, as she would say. I'll read it a couple of times. By homely gift and hindered words, the human heart is told of nothing. Nothing is the force that renovates the world. By homely gift and hindered words, the human heart is told of nothing. Nothing is the force that renovates the world. And you since you're not seeing this, I'm reading it. The human heart is told of nothing, and a dash, and then nothing is capitalized and in quotes. Nothing is the force that renovates the world. So, no thing that we might receive, no homely gift, no material thing we might receive, no homely gift, or vain attempts with language, hindered words, limited, hindered words, can reveal to us the ultimate freedom and liberation in the midst of this immense and complex world that we're curious about. In other words, those gifts and those words, the human heart is told of nothing with a small n. That's not getting it. And then she writes, nothing, whatever that stands for, capitalized in quotient, is the force that renovates the world. And so I'm following this trail with Coben, in his quote where he said, nobody and nothing. And then following it to Dickinson's nothing. I think they're both pointing to something about emptiness as somehow transformative. I'm totally imagining, that Emily Dickinson is suggesting that the fate of the world depends on our ability to embrace no thing. And that might open us, and if we're unable to do that, to follow this trail, and not rely just on material objects, grasping things in the world, or words and ideas and just intellectual abstractions. If we do that, we're kind of doomed to suffer. And then counterintuitively, she suggests that this nothing, like it seems like nothing, is a force. It's really curious. And so in my mind, and she would hate this probably, I think she's exploring the kind of emptiness that the Prajnaparamita teachings express, like in the Heart Sutra, and how it relates to everyday life. There's something really powerful about nothing that Coben and she are both talking about, because it's a force that changes the world. It's what we call Buddha. There's a line well into the Heart Sutra, in one of the translations we chant sometimes, it says, with nothing to attain, a bodhisattva relies on Prajnaparamita, ultimate wisdom. With nothing to attain, a bodhisattva relies on Prajnaparamita, and thus the mind is without hindrance. Without hindrance, there's no fear. Far beyond all inverted views, one realizes nirvana. Nothing renovates your mind. Nothing renovates your body in your life, in the world. And without the hindrances, you aren't hindered by fear. And stepping beyond inverted views, those complicated words, one realizes nirvana. So we'll circle back to Coben in our maze, returning to the self, the true self that is nobody, is nothing but complete awakening. We call this Buddha. So now we've kind of investigated the nothing. What would we call this Buddha? So I got curious about that. What do we call Buddha? And there's a lovely quote from Reb Anderson's writing on one of the Buddha's sutras in his book, The Third Turning of the Wheel. And Reb speaks in a certain way that's kind of interesting. Listen to the language. A Buddha is someone who sees the way things really are. That's enough right there. But a Buddha is someone who sees the way things really are. When we see the way things really are, we see that we're all in this together and that we're all interdependent. A great surpassing love arises from that wisdom. And that love leads a Buddha to wish that all beings would open to this wisdom and be free of the misery that arises from ignoring the way things are. Buddhas appear in the world because they want us to have Buddha's wisdom, so that we will love every single being completely and protect every single being without exception and without limit, just as all the Buddhas do. It's a very concise, and it's a nice weaving, isn't it, of what it means to be an ordinary human being and to be a Buddha. So when Kobun says, we call this Buddha, Reb says, the Buddha is someone who sees the way things really are. And when we see the way things really are, we see we're all in this together. We're all interdependent. We do this in inquiry all the time. And a great surpassing love arises from that wisdom. Sometimes we feel it, don't you? And then you come back next week. And that love leads a Buddha to wish that all beings would open to this wisdom and be free of the misery that arises from ignoring the way things are. That's what inquiry is for. Buddhas appear in the world, and here I'll say it a funny way. Buddhas appear online because they want us to have a Buddha's wisdom, so that we will love every single being online completely and offline, and protect every being without exception and without limit, just as all Buddhas do. So I think it's really beautiful, and it's very functional, and it's a very clear definition of Buddha and Buddha's function. It's full of truth and it's full of heart. But at the same time, there's some way in which I think it falls a little short of the nobody and the nothing expressed in the emptiness teachings that Emily Dickinson and Kobun are pointing to. I don't think it goes far enough. It's the foundation, but it doesn't go far enough to meet Emily Dickinson's criteria for renovating the world. The nothing that is the force that renovates the world. So here's another pebble. And by this point, maybe you're thinking, maybe this just isn't the way Flint does inquiry. Maybe this is just ADD. Going from one thing to another and piecing all these associations. But that's how my mind works. And so I console myself with saying, oh, it's like Indra's net. Everything's connected. So, or it just maybe pathology. I don't know. Anyway, here's the next one. As I do, and many I've told you, I read the blogs and listen to podcasts from Padre Gotoma in his poetry. In his most recent blog, he was exploring the relationship between desire and lack, a real fundamental thing in Zen practice. Very fundamental. And here are some of his words. He says, want. To name want, is to name both my desire and my lack. What do I want today? Well, I want for many things, and then he goes on to describe some of that personally. But then he says, I want for nothing. I've repeated again and again also, thinking of how it can mean I'm without need, but also, and this is the curious one, how my need is for some sense of absence, some experience of nothing. That primal unknowing that moves us, as Emily Dickinson said in her poem 1563. That's where I got it. My need is from a sense of absence, some experience of nothing, that primal unknowing, prajna paramita, that moves us, as Emily Dickinson said in her poem 1563. Some sense of absence. But so I'm asking, like, absence of what? Homely gifts and hindered words, which Emily Dickinson talks about. Absence of self, which is born of longing, clinging, and becoming, which Kobun talks about. The true self that's nobody. And then suddenly John O'Donohue enters the room in his blessing for absence. And I'll read just the first two lines as I keep weaving these things together. Here's the first two lines of his blessing for absence. May you know that absence is alive with hidden presence. that nothing is ever lost or forgotten. Absence is alive with hidden presence. And in the retreat this weekend, I referenced David Hinton's lovely little book, Existence, in which he's reflecting on a beautiful Chinese painting. And he writes, empty awareness and expansive presence. So he's talking in some ways about the relative and the absolute, about the embodied and the inconceivable, the mundane and the sublime. Empty awareness and expansive presence are a single tissue. Presence is the 10,000 things in constant transformation. Existence, vast and deep, everything and everywhere. And absence is the generative void from which this ever-changing realm of presence perpetually emerges. This is very Taoist, of course. And he says meditation returns us to the generative source of things, not to think, to the generative source of things, as does taking refuge. Presence emerging from and returning to absence in a process of constant transformation. The world is actually made and taken apart, made and taken apart and renovated. So one last little bit. How would you ground this in classical Zen practice? Flint says, as he's thinking about doing inquiry. And so I went to, of course, who would we go to? Dogen. And the Genjo Koan. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, I know a lot of you do, the Genjo Koan is such a central piece, and it's beautiful, and we chant it and study it. And it was a letter that he wrote to a lay student. It wasn't some like sutra-like thing or big Dharma talk in a hall. It wasn't even to the monks that he was training. It was a letter. This is an email, so to speak, that Dogen sent to a student. The first two lines, as all things are Buddha Dharma, there is delusion and realization, practice, birth and death. They're Buddhas and sentient beings. All the apparent dualities, delusion, realization, right, all that, exists within this nothing. As all things are Buddha Dharma, there's nothing outside of Buddha Dharma. So we get delusion, we get realization. The whole is all here. Everything is here. Next sentence. As the myriad things are without an abiding self, remember, things are without an abiding self. There's no delusion, no realization, no Buddha, no sentient being, no birth and death. So in the usual Zen way, he turns it around. It's like, wait a minute. This is nothing but complete awakening, empty and free. Things are not what they seem to be. No thing exists as solid and ongoing. Okay? Then the next sentence. The Buddha way, then, is basically leaping clear of the many and the one. In other words, leaping clear of both of these. Thus, their birth and death, delusion and realization, sentient beings and Buddhas. It's like, oh, it's all here. Not this, not that, not emptiness, not fullness, the embodied inconceivable. Stepping beyond trying to nail things down. That's what renovates the world. Stepping beyond trying to make them solid and continuous. And then, the most famous of all is that segment where he says, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by the myriad things. When actualized by myriad things, body and mind, as well as the body and mind of others, falls away. No trace of realization remains, and this no trace continues endlessly. That's the one you want to memorize and stay with, that section. To study the Buddha way is to study the self. We turn our light inward, we take the backward step, we do investigate. We watch the ripple in the puddle. To study the self is to forget the self. Doesn't mean you forget who you are. It just reveals that as we study, we realize what we're studying is not solid like we thought it was. It's not what it seems. The next sentence, to forget the self is to be actualized by the myriad things. Oh, we're not the center of the universe. We exist as a response to every single thing in every single moment. And then when actualized by the myriad things, when we begin to realize this, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drop away. You don't disappear. We just realize we're not the center of the universe. And the way that we hold things, it's good to hold lightly. What we take as important changes. The world's beginning to be renovated. In the last sentence, no trace of realization remains, and this no trace continues endlessly. No trace of realization. It's not something you've done. And that nothing is the force that renovates the world, and it's boundless. So continue lively association after lively association. This is what I'm encouraging you to do in your practice. Because it gets really interesting, at least for me. I hope it's still interesting for you with all these twists and turns. It reminds me of, not driving, I don't drive, but riding with all my friends in the UK. And how these little roads twisting and turning and going over and in with walls and sheep. And it's like the twisting and turning, but you learn about the territory. And it's so beautiful. One more drop in the bucket here from Vasubandhu, and I'm not going to go into those teachings right now. But at the very end of Vasubandhu's teachings on the three natures, here's the line. Ready? Here we go. This is the inconceivable, wholesome, unstained, constant realm, the blissful body of liberation, the Dharma body of the great sage. Okay, that's a mouthful. And there are these pairs that are kind of strange. Inconceivable and wholesome. Unstained, constant, blissful body. Vast is the robe of liberation, the Dharma body, wearing the universal teaching. But here's the piece I really want us to do. Okay, I can't hear you because you're muted. And plus it would make a weird thing if we all had our voices. But I want you to do this, okay? You can gesture or you can just look out around you. And I'm going to say this sentence little by little and you're going to repeat it. I want you to say it with your voice and look out because you're going to be saying this, like this, okay? Here we go. This is the inconceivable. Wholesome, unstained, constant realm. The blissful body of liberation. The Dharma body of the great sage. This. Okay? He means it. So do I. You can do it this way too. This way. You know, Trudy already started doing it. I saw her. Say this. This. This is the inconceivable. Unstained. Constant realm. This is the blissful body of liberation, the Dharma body of the great sage. Returning to the self, the true self, which is nobody, is nothing but the complete awakening. We call this Buddha. By homely gift and hindered words, the human heart is told of nothing. Nothing is the force that renovates the world. So once again, thanks for going on the trek with me, but I also wanted to demonstrate some things in doing it. This is inquiry. This is, once again, it's not teaching content. It's not a seminar. It's like, how do we move together in this amazing world and follow the trail. And where does it lead us? In the great mystery. And if you need a little help with GPS now, you can raise your hand. Like, where the heck did we go? And what is it that you're interested in? Or what does it call forward? Because now we're in it together. Now we're pointing to features in the landscape and wondering what's going on. We don't want to fall into the. Um, it reminds me of driving in Costa Rica, where you're driving on these roads and you don't know. There's an ox cart and then there's a pothole, but you don't know if the pothole's big enough to swallow up the whole car. You have to kind of help each other. Sandra.
Wow, it's so nice to be here. We haven't been in quiet for a little bit, and and when you say it's not teaching, it's just inquiry. Just when I was listening to you, that's what I was missing. It's just walking with you where you are. That's the way I see it. It's walking. You take us with you in your own world, the things that are moving in you in that moment.
Yes, yes. And I like that. Just, yeah, come on.
Yeah, and I was feeling that invitation. I say, wow, it's and it was so much information what you gave, which is beautiful. But for me, what is still in here is the last what you did. This open to that and be with me
Yeah.
and take it lightly, taking lightly all these conditions and suffering and all that. Uh, in my life suddenly it's like open to what is this, and there's something that is lately in my mind about aging,
Mm.
impermanence, and say, what how do I really want to live what I have left,
Yes, yes.
because it's my time is shorter and start getting shorter, you know and and it's that, and you really touch all that. Let's say, wow, it's like take everything lightly and just live this.
Mhm.
It's like, in the center say, wake up, don't squander your life.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a little bit like, once again, I think Josh has used this as an image. It's like we went into a museum and we're watching the exhibit, and there's all these paintings and all these sculptures and things. And, I give you a little quote here. There's a lot of information. And at the end, when you walk out, you're not remembering the catalog. You're remembering the impact.
Yeah. And which is that's the important part, no?
And that's what you'll take with you as you enter as our new head student.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you to everybody to be here.
What Sandra is mentioning is important. I know along the way, I point to a lot of features, which seems like a lot of content, but I'm not interested in you remembering all those things. I'm interested in how it renovates us, what you're left with. That's why we did the embodied expression at the end. As we get older, like she said, and certainly this is one thing I'm reflecting on, or if we come to the end of our life, it doesn't matter if you remember the quote from Dogen, but it does matter if your heart's been opened and your mind is settled by having taken the journey together.
Flint,
Betty?
I really enjoyed this. I love the idea of following the thought train, following all the trails that you opened me up to. And what you just said and what Sandra just said reminded me of something that I learned where it says, literally, I'm looking at it. People may forget what you said, they may forget what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And the opening and the freedom that I feel from the idea of knowing that I don't have to hold on. It's like the difference in the way I read, trying to remember every single thing I read, like I'm going to take some final exam versus letting it in and then realizing I know some of this as opposed to every single word of it. Um, you started in the beginning and you reminded me of someone offering the idea that I could watch my thinking and then write about it and follow it, but mostly pay attention to it because when I don't, I'm sort of a reactionary. I respond in ways that sometimes I'm not so proud of. And when I have to come back and do sort of a forensic exam of what was that and what was going on for me. And so there was so much freedom and beauty in what you offered today. And I wanted to say thank you.
Sure. And what you just said reminds me to emphasize that even awakening is no thing. It's not a stable thing.
Yeah.
You can be quite awake and then you go visit your family or something, and or there's some big downturn and or some shock, and suddenly, the not so great part of you shows, and you have to come back. And so
Yeah.
all of you will always be there, but where's your center of gravity, and where do you return? Do
Yeah.
you make new narratives that just reinforce your positions about the world, or do you keep letting them go and keep letting them go and keep letting them go?
Yeah. It reminds me of something I've been going through. An old sage friend of mine says, learn from your mistakes. And it's not always mistakes that I get to learn from. I get to learn from the experiences, having walked through some difficult communications with one of our children, adult children, and getting through it. And the resultant, which was so beautiful, was that I saw him, I felt his agency. And when we were done, I could tell that he felt heard.
Mhm.
That's something I get to continue to build on and not try to freeze frame it and make it wonderful, but to go, wow, thank you. So
Never ends if you're lucky.
yeah, amen. Thank you.
Oh, we have Penelope.
Hello. Thank you,
Oh,
Flint. Um, anyway, thank you for all your great teachings today. But I wanted to ask you if you could say a little more about David Hinton's book on his thoughts on the Chinese painting.
Mhm. He's it's a small book about existence, sort of existential in some ways, and the first line of the book is very easy to memorize. He says, "This is a story of existence, and it begins with a painting." And then he shows a painting by Xu Tu, which is a classical Chinese, um, painting, and the immense amount of absence, as you know, in those old Chinese paintings. And he takes it as a starting point to help us understand Buddha's mind, really, of absence and presence, of what he calls the existence tissue,
Mhm.
which I think of as Dharma and Buddha. And so it's a lovely book. And he also, from if you're interested in this, he talks about art, calligraphy, and Chinese language, and how those practices in that day were the foundations for Zen because of the way that they're very different way of looking at the world than our language and culture offers us, which is some of what these quotes that I was giving today talk about. So I would recommend it.
That's great. That's the path I follow, with my work as well. I mean, I'd love to
Yeah,
read the book, see what you talk.
absolutely. It's natural for you, knowing your artwork and knowing also the depth in the your practice. What was you you did that series from Nagarjuna, right?
Yes.
Versus to the center.
Vast emptiness, nothing holy.
Yeah, vast emptiness, nothing holy. Yeah, it's not. You're not obscure about this. You paint this stuff straight on. So
Mm.
yeah, so this one will be a good addition to your library, I think, and you'll enjoy it.
Like you say, it's another pebble.
Little pebble, right?
I love that. That's so beautiful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you should have seen her canvases that went around the whole gallery. Vast emptiness, nothing holy. Quite amazing. I'm realizing that all of you are like pebbles too for me in my consciousness because I've known so many of you, like I just said about Penelope, for example, and Sue and Mike and Sandra. It's like I've known so many of you for so long that I think, oh, this is how the myriad things are manifesting this. And then Bridget raised her hand, and then she comes in.
Well, I know this is a lightning round, but I'm so glad to see you and be able to be back with you. I've been so hoarse I wouldn't have been able to speak.
Oh, really? Are you feeling better?
I'm feeling lots better, and I'm looking forward to the intensive here and to some things prior to that. But this reminds me so much as I've been recovering from this infection. I've been watching too much Amanpour and all these things, and so it reminds me of your quote years ago about, and I was going to ask you to refresh me because I've been watching these things about what's happening in the world, and it makes me more agitated, and then I can't sleep. Which wolf do you feed? So what's the precedent to that? The pre
Well, it's an old story that talks about, and sometimes there are wholesome things that come into our mind and our heart, and sometimes there are unwholesome things. The image in the story was about
Mhm.
a kind wolf or a terrifying hound. It's
Mhm.
which one do you feed?
Okay, it's which one you feed. All right.
Yeah. So your intimation already, even though you don't remember the story, is right on because you're saying, if I feed the one of fear and distress and despair and
Mhm.
anguish, then that's what I get more of.
Right.
That's the foundation of karma. We all do things, and every time we do anything,
Mhm.
everything, we're planting a seed that will set the stage for the repetition of that activity again, or
Mhm.
the habit of a mind, not an activity, even habit of mind.
Mhm.
So, and everything is connected. So every single thing you think and do makes a difference.
Mhm.
And so it's good to wake up.
Right. Well, this just ties everything together because I'm I need to return to more of these writings and these references, and you've given a great many opportunities to reflect on the things you quoted today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Just because of our time difference, Aaron and I end up starting pretty early because by the time right now it's um, 8 o'clock in the morning here, it's 1 o'clock in the morning Central Time. I mean, in the afternoon. So we're doing work with people all over, so we have to start very early. But I noticed that today I woke up quite early just because I couldn't quite stay asleep. And I sat for a little bit and then read in a book that I'm reading. It's a Dharma book, but it's really joyful. Instead of opening the computer or looking at the phone, And that's a simple thing, everybody knows. But to start the day that way in the quiet darkness of the morning is very different than jumping right in, which I'm so want to do because I'm kind of behind, it seems like sometimes. But not worth it. Got to take time. So that's just simple. What do you feed, you know? And it also helps us remember something. That if we're caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Flint, for inviting us along on your wanderings and the trails it opened up for you. And thank you all for coming along on the trails with us all. It's been wonderful. So thank you so much for that. And if you'd like to offer dana to Appamada, then please do go to appamada.org and you'll find a place there to offer whatever you feel moved to offer. And it's very gratefully received and appreciated. So thank you so much. And if you'd like to continue for a further 30 minutes with myself on the porch, please pop yourself into gallery view and I'll be with you in just a moment. Thank you all so much. Thank you.